The time period I'm going to talk about today is 1600 to 1663. I'm going to be talking about French colonies and settlements, fur trade, Aboriginal alliances, and the Roman Catholic Church. First, the French settlements. So in 1608, Samuel de Champlain felt that settlement was important, that a lot of people were coming to the New World as traders and to make money, but he needed to establish a settlement in order for there to be control over the fur trade. And he was right. Having a settlement did control who came in and who left, but that's all people were doing. No one was staying in New France. So in 1627, the King of France gave a monopoly in the fur trade to the Company of 100 Associates, with the agreement that yes, they could trade, they could go to New France and the New World and work in the fur trade and come back and make profits, but they had to agree to encourage people to go and settle and stay in New France. And it worked for a little while. Around 4,000 French residents from France and Europe did come to Canada and live in New France. But because of all the wars that were happening in Europe at the time, the Company of 100 Associates went bankrupt. So that trend of colonization and sending people to the New World, it started to slow down. And Samuel de Champlain began to get worried because other European countries who were seeing the wealth that was possible in the New World were starting to come. He was really worried about England and the English and the Dutch coming and taking over a little of the land and of the fur trade. Aboriginal relationships. The Aboriginals were essential to the success of the fur trade. They had all the information. They knew where to find the animals. They knew how to survive in the terrain. They knew how to deal with the weather. They just knew about life in this new world. They were fundamental to their success of settlements and of the fur trade. And the traders would exchange manufactured goods with the Aboriginals in exchange for their knowledge and for the furs. And after doing this for several years, they developed alliances. So certain countries would have certain alliances with certain Aboriginal groups. So like Samuel de Champlain, he traded with the Algonquins, and he had an alliance with them. So they would only bring their furs to his people. Other European countries would have alliances with other Aboriginal tribes, which caused a new dynamic. These tribes that had lived in harmony forever were now in dispute with each other. They were competing with each other for fur and land, and at times killing each other in the pursuit of this. And eventually what happens were those trade partners became military partners. So conflicts that originated in Europe that moved to the New World, now if you were a trade alliance with a certain European country, those Aboriginal tribes would now be military alliances with them. The Courier Dubois, like I said, the Aboriginals had the knowledge, and it was easier and safer to travel with the Aboriginals into the interior of the New World, and it could be more profitable. If you weren't traveling with an actual trade company like the Company of 100 Associates, independent traders or Courier Dubois could travel with an Aboriginal group into the interior and get the furs themselves. Then when they returned to France, their profits were greater because they didn't have to pay to that company that they worked for. Often, and they spent a lot of time with these Aboriginal tribes. And if they were going further in the interior, they would be sort of isolated for months at a time, and they would develop relationships and friendships. And some of them even married Aboriginal women and had children. And the Courier Dubois were responsible for that further exploration into the interior. We have to remember that most of the traders were coming to the shores, so the east coast of Canada and the United States. They weren't exploring into the interior. They came, the Aboriginals would bring them the furs, then they would return to France. The Courier Dubois were really responsible for that further exploration into the interior of the entire country. The Roman Catholic Church. When Champlain first developed the settlement of New France, he really wanted it to represent the values and beliefs that were from France. And the king agreed. So they decided that only those individuals who were members of the Catholic Church could apply to emigrate to New France. And so in New France, the Roman Catholic Church had a huge role. They were responsible for hospitals and schools and for monitoring religion. So if you think about this, the amount of influence they would have had over the values and beliefs that were in these new settlements. They also had a role of conversion. They had this idea that they could convert the Aboriginals to follow the beliefs of the Roman Catholic Church. And they sent over Jesuit priests, and they actually established a missionary in Huronia, which is where the Huron tribe lives, trying to convert those Aboriginals to the Roman Catholic Church. They had a lot of influence.